Hey Amarillo, I'm Jason Boyett, and you're listening to Hey Amarillo, the interview podcast featuring some of the most interesting people and stories of Amarillo, Texas. This episode of Hey Amarillo is supported by Lazy Boy Home Furnishings. You know Lazy Boy as a national brand, you know its products, but the Amarillo store is independently owned and operated by the Hawkins family, and they do live here in town. And here's the thing, Lazy Boy offers a lot more than just recliners. Amarillo's locally owned Lazy Boy Home Furnishings has a ton of good products in stock. They're ready to take home or deliver today. So go visit the showroom today at 3636 Soncy. That's Lazy Boy of Amarillo. And as part of this podcast partnership with Brick and Elm Magazine, I want to give a podcast shout out to Panhandle Plains Historical Museum, Amarillo College, and the city of Tucumcari at visittucumcarinm.com. You can read the new July-August issue of Brick and Elm online at brickandelm.com. We just released this new issue. The cover feature is about ice cream. It's so much fun. So go grab a print copy at United Supermarkets locations, Market 33, Burrowing Owl Books, and other locations across town. Today's guest is Sharla Valdez. Sharla grew up on a farm and ranch here in the Texas Panhandle. She went to WT, where she became a hospice nurse. And then in her 20s, she became one of the founders of Crown of Texas Hospice, which operated in Amarillo for more than a decade. And so we talk about that story and her accidental entrepreneurship and the growth of hospice care as a concept in Amarillo, because Crown of Texas was at the leading edge. And after that, Sharla poured her energy into the world of pharmacy, opening up Valmed Home Health and Pharmacy Solutions, an independent pharmacy and medical business that she has just recently exited. And so we discuss all those things in this episode, including starting women-owned businesses, leaving or selling those businesses, and what it's like to be an entrepreneur in Amarillo. So here's Sharla Valdez. Sharla Valdez, welcome to the Hey Amarillo podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an honor for me to have you here. I want to start with you the same way I start with all my guests, and that's just to ask you why you're in Amarillo. So what brought you to this area in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I'm actually from Panhandle, Texas.
Okay.
And just haven't gone far.
Yep.
Went to school in Canyon at WT and just started out in Amarillo. So
did you stay in Panhandle like all the way through high school?
I did.
Okay.
I did. Basically raised there on a farm and ranch, and it's a great life, a great community, and enjoyed that a lot. Never thought I'd live in the big city of Amarillo, but which is kind of funny that I always thought when I was growing up it was such a big city and intimidating. But we love Amarillo. We love being here. We love the people. There's so many good things about Amarillo.
Were you one of those families that, made the drive to Amarillo for shopping and movies on the weekend and all that kind of stuff?
Yes. You had to get all of your chores done on a Saturday morning before you could come to Amarillo and do a little shopping and movies. You're right. Come with a group of friends and experience Amarillo. Is a lot of fun to come here.
When you graduated from high school in Panhandle, was WT always on the radar, or did you have the idea that you needed to get out of here and go someplace else? What was that decision?
Yes, I did think about other colleges or universities, but my parents both graduated from WT, and actually my grandfather went to WT.
Okay.
So that's pretty exciting to have that family history at WT. I'm a strong supporter. Part of me wanted to get further away from home, but really it was a perfect place for me.
Did you know what you wanted to do? Did you have a career plan at that point?
At that point, I did want to go into healthcare. I wasn't positive what part of healthcare, but decided on nursing, and it was a wonderful experience. I love being a nurse. I love the experience that I had at WT. My professors were wonderful people and just great experiences that I obtained at WT.
So tell me about your nursing career then, because I know that's you've stayed in healthcare for all of your career, not
Yes.
necessarily direct nursing. So tell me what happened those first few years after you graduated.
Yeah, so really, actually, it was while I was still in school at WTN Nursing School that my mom and my grandmother decided to be hospice volunteers.
Okay.
And it was when hospice was very new in Amarillo. before the St. Anthony's Hospice building, way before all of that.
Yeah, people don't realize, like, during the 80s or so, like, hospice as an idea was just developing, right?
Exactly. And people would mispronounce it. They would say hospic, or not even know how to pronounce it, what it was really for. But my grandfather had passed away, and my grandmother was a volunteer at High Plains Baptist Hospital at the time, and decided that she would like to take the volunteer training class. And so my mom said that she would do it with her. And the night that Sister Olivia was to speak to the crowd, I snuck in and listened to her from the steps in the auditorium at the old St. Anthony's Hospital. Pretty bold back then, and fell in love with the whole concept, fell in love with Sister Olivia and her spirit, and asked if I could go ahead and go to some of the classes, but I couldn't come to all of them because I was still in classes at WT. And they said, no, we really want you to do the whole volunteer training. You can't just do part of it. So I didn't experience it then, but she did also come to one of our classes at WT and spoke. And I knew in my heart right away that I wanted to be a hospice nurse.
Okay.
And at the time, it was kind of a thing that you just didn't do as a graduate nurse.
Like, that wasn't a track that you could have studied at WT, right?
No. And they would think, most of the school of thought then was that you really need to be like an ICU nurse and learn the machines and all of the things about healthcare before you do something where basically they thought just holding someone's hand while they're dying. And I saw more depth in hospice than that, just through Sister Olivia. There's so much as a nurse that you can do in hospice, in that you really have to have strong assessment skills to be able to control or try to prevent symptoms or manage symptoms, such as pain and nausea and vomiting and constipation, and
like, you're trying to relieve all that stuff.
Exactly. You want them to be very comfortable and alert and awake and able to be with family, and you want to be that support for family. So there's so much more to hospice than back then people really realized. There's a science to it. So again, being fairly bold, I told my instructors that's what I wanted to do. They tried to talk me out of it, but interviewed and got a job as a graduate nurse. It takes a while to get your boards back then, or go to your state board test back then. So I started as a graduate nurse. They had just started small 4 to 6 beds on the oncology unit, inpatient. And we had a closet for a nurse's station. I had great mentors, also had the oncology nurses down the hall that you could also learn from. Got to start my whole hospice career that way.
Okay, so your nursing career was immediately as a hospice nurse.
Yes.
All right.
And it's something I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
And something I'm still very passionate about. As hospice grew, and the city of Amarillo, the community of Amarillo and the surrounding area came together to provide donations to build the inpatient facility, that was world renowned. I mean, it just wasn't a thing in the United States even to have an inpatient unit like we had in St. Anthony's Hospice. So it was, quite an honor to be able to be part of that growth and part of that learning for the whole community, the whole area, about what hospice is.
Before we talk about Crown of Texas and sort of how your hospice career developed, I want to talk a little bit just about that setting, because I would think, as a new nurse, coming out of nursing school, your focus is, we want to make people better. We want to keep them alive. We want to address these symptoms. And then you have to switch the way you think about it with hospice, because you understand that once you enter hospice, you're probably not going to get better. And so it's managing symptoms, but the end goal is different. Does that take like a mental pivot as a nurse, or did it just fit right in with everything that you'd been doing?
Yeah, I think that what fits in about hospice and being a hospice nurse is really not about that focus on the health that we all want to have, but it's about having that ability to be able to help people to be the best they can be through the end of their life. So you're focusing on a lot of the same things in that you want people to be as healthy as possible, as long as possible, so that they can enjoy the moments with their family and their friends, and to be able to say their thank yous and their I love yous and their goodbyes. So it doesn't feel like that you're focusing on something negative. You're focusing really on something very positive. I think really what changed my mind also is just being a nurse technician in the hospital and seeing that dying patients at that time were kind of put in the last room of the hall, and nobody really wanted to go down there.
Right.
But it intrigued me, and it helped me too to be able to have my grandmother and my mom understanding of what I was doing, and very passionate also about that.
Okay.
So, my grandmother would be a volunteer, and she would bring flowers from her yard or make special cookies or do something. She's just quite a caregiver, and would go into those rooms and be with those patients that were enrolled in hospice, that were at the end of the hall that had really seemed to be forgotten about. And it just was a ministry to me to be able to be with people during that time.
I think that's important because a lot of people, probably even nurses, there's a discomfort with death and with people who are dying or people who are very sick.
Yes.
It's just kind of baked in to the human condition, I think,
is.
And so some people will think about someone who wants to volunteer at a hospice or wants to be a hospice nurse and just think, I could never do that. I'm completely uncomfortable in that setting.
Yes.
And yet you had something about your personality, your upbringing, your character that drew you toward that. Do you think that that's something that some people are just innately equipped, prepared, or gifted to do?
I really do. I think we all have gifts. And, the nurses that can work in ICU to me have a huge gift.
Okay.
Because that's something I would never be interested in.
But they might think, oh, you couldn't teach me to do that kind of hospice stuff. That's not me, right?
Exactly. So I think that it's really important to find your gifts. Mm-hmm. And I think that I have just been very privileged to be able to be with people at the end of their life. You learn so much about life and about living. One of a hospice patient told me once that I was so lucky, and I'm like, why do you say that? And thinking that I can just do what I want to do. And she goes, no, you are so lucky because you are the keepers of lost dreams.
Wow.
Yes. You can be the one that learns from all of us how you should live your life and live your dreams. And I don't know, when you see that there's so many people that, like you're saying, that just don't want to be part of death and dying, that are worried that they're going to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. If you could just have presence with mm-hmm. people, that's what's so important. But it is definitely a conversation stopper.
Yeah.
It was really good at cocktail parties when you can say, oh, what do you do? And you say hospice. And they're like, oh, okay, I need to get another drink. They kind of walk away. Nobody really wanted to talk about it. And back then, it's easier to talk about now because hospice is more known, but it's still not something that everybody wants to talk about.
No, to me, it seems like one of those things that until you have experienced it, until you've seen its value, or until you've been in a situation where someone is dying and you feel the weight of that, then you're like, okay, you step through the veil a little bit, and then maybe that discomfort is something you can overcome. But if it's completely unfamiliar to you, it's just hard to put yourself in that position.
Oh, it really is. I think that it takes those mentors in life, the people that can help you to set an example of how you can just be with people and when they need you the most.
So tell me about the transition for you from St. Anthony's Hospice to Crown of Texas.
With St. Anthony's Hospice, basically a group of us were let go.
Okay.
So I thought
because that was around the time that Baptist St. Anthony's merged, or was it?
It was before that.
It was before that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. It was after Sister Olivia had left, and it was a time that is a hospital-based hospice and political, but I thought my world had come to an end.
Okay.
Right.
You weren't ready for that.
Wasn't ready for that. It wasn't ready for that. And sometimes, things happen in your life that you can definitely learn from and grow from. And within a month, we had our corporate charter to start Crown of Texas Hospice.
Okay. So you moved quickly then to start your own thing.
I guess grief or, tragedy, things that happen in your life, if you can use that energy to make something positive. And we really thought that if we had 40 patients, that would be huge. And we were criticized even. I got letters even from people in the state of Texas and hospice organizations criticizing us for starting a for-profit hospice.
Right, because it was not directly connected to a hospital, which is how most of them had been at that point.
Most of them had been, correct, or they were nonprofit hospices in the community. But we felt that as being a for-profit, not that it really matters, for-profit, nonprofit, but what mattered was the fact that we controlled, what we can do.
Okay.
We didn't have to ask administration in a big hospital that maybe just didn't really understand hospice.
You don't want a hospice subject to bureaucracy and red tape, right?
Exactly.
With all the decisions that you have to make, sometimes very quickly.
Exactly. And, the simple things, like the last thing I remember really fighting for was just so the parking area didn't change around the building to employee parking so that patients and families can have easy access.
Right.
And, that's kind of silly, but it's something that was very important to me. That in starting a hospice that we really stuck with our mission and our ministry. It wasn't about your tax status, right? It's really more about what you can do with your mission and ministry. And we built the best team of people. It was just unbelievable group of people to take care of patients and families, and we did it the right way. I still have employees that come up to me and say, we had the best hospice ever. And I'm like, yes, we did. And we're very, very proud of what we accomplished. But you're right. When St. Anthony's, because High Plains Baptist Hospital at the time was very supportive of us. They actually helped us with rent. They helped us have beds in the facility. They were just a strong partner because, there was a lot of competition at the time between the two hospitals. And when they talked about merging, my heart sank. I was like, oh no, we've lost our biggest supporter. I don't know what we're going to do. So we got out a map and we just did a little market research and decided to start a hospice in Austin and changed our minds to the Woodlands and then changed it to Conroe, Texas. So we started another hospice. It was very young. We had Crown of Texas Hospice before I was 30. I remember doing our first survey and the surveyors are like, I can't believe this, that, you're not even 30 and you're started a hospice. And it was exciting times though. I wanted to be the Sam Walton of hospices. I wanted to go into those communities like Amarillo and Conroe and, not the huge cities, but to be able to expand what we could do because I knew we were doing it well. But it really was a challenge having two locations and keeping, that quality. But it was just amazing. I mean, my parents helped. They were investors. My mom worked with me. It was just a really very special time. Difficult, don't get me wrong. It's very difficult. We grew to have over 450 patients and lots of staff, and it just got very demanding.
When you're directing Crown of Texas Hospice in Amarillo, you have a lot of authority over like the culture and the people and day-to-day operations that's harder to have in Conroe.
You're right.
So was that a challenge, like, bringing that Amarillo-based personality to a different part of the state?
Yes, and that's a good point. So, the really neat thing about Conroe, it was a lot like Amarillo back in the day. And what's crazy is when we went there was a Cloth World and a Hastings.
I remember Cloth World for sure, and Hastings.
And they were both started in Amarillo.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, this is the right place to be. They had this similar type of hospitals and the similar, medical students, similar rural areas. I mean, if you go there today, it's not like that.
Right.
But then it was so much like Amarillo, it really didn't feel that different. But we would have staff come to Amarillo
Okay.
and be with the staff here, have that culture, try to replicate that culture. And then we would go there quite often to also be able to keep that culture. And of course, it was different. We were able to keep things the same type of mission and philosophy of care.
Did you mentioned wanting to be the Sam Walton of hospice? Did that entrepreneurial drive surprise you? Like, was that something that you were aware existed when you were younger? Because, I mean, going from being a hospice nurse to starting your own hospice, even by the age of 30, like, that's a real change for a lot of people.
I probably couldn't do it again today, but I was, raised on a farm and ranch, a multi-generational farm and ranch. My mom's side of the family were farm and ranchers. My dad's side of the family, farm and ranchers. I had the ability to be, in a small community like Panhandle, I showed pigs and steers and heifers, and even showed my dad's and my granddad's bulls at stock shows. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's sales in a lot of ways. There's an entrepreneurial aspect of that.
Exactly. And you would, witness when you had a great wheat crop, and you would also witness when a hailstorm came and demolished everything. You would witness the high feed bills and, for feeding cattle, or I don't know. And I was involved in 4-H there as well. So I learned very quickly about hard work, about doing the things that you're passionate about. I just had a very strong work ethic, but I also think I say this all the time, but I would like to do research. How many people that are raised on a farm and ranch are able to be entrepreneurs? Because especially women, I think you just get that extra ability to learn to take risk, maybe.
And solve problems.
That's a good point.
Tell me about the life cycle of Crown of Texas Hospice, which is probably a weird phrase to use for a hospice. But tell me, once you started it, once you got it going, what happened over the next, several years?
Well, as we grew, we also were able to develop new programs. For example, in our bereavement, we started a camp for grieving children. It was wonderful. It was called Sky Camp. We did it every year. We even brought kids. We would bring staff and children from the Conroe area here.
Okay.
We'd be at Cedar Canyon and have a week-long camp with those children. That was very exciting and something that we were very, very proud of. We had inpatient facility at Northwest and part of the pavilion that turned out to be very comfortable and peaceful for patients and families that needed that. With a strong volunteer base, the thing about hospice is it's interdisciplinary. Right. So you have nurses and social workers and counselors and bereavement counselors and spiritual care. And that's what makes it very unique. I mean, I think a lot of healthcare should learn from hospice because of the interdisciplinary approach to hospice care.
Tell me how the hospice world in Amarillo has changed since, when you were first starting, you were involved maybe at the ground level for a lot of that introduction to Amarillo. Where are we now?
When we started Crown of Texas Hospice, like I said, we got a lot of naysayers because how dare you compete with the only hospice that we have here? And I think now a lot has changed in hospice in that in Amarillo, we have several hospices. Some of them are home care based hospices. So they have a home care and they started a hospice. Baptist St. Anthony's now has a BSA Hospice of the Southwest, which is more like what we had as far as being independent, but yet having those relationships with the hospitals, which are great. I think that hospice in general, maybe not Amarillo, I'm not speaking for Amarillo, but I think, I read a lot. I think there are a lot of hospices out there that are starting not for the right reasons, but just really to be able to keep their patients and not have to let them go. So in other words, not really putting all their efforts into hospice, but basically, I think that it's kind of watered down. I don't know how to word it. It's not that Sister Olivia approach to hospice care in every hospice program. I'm not saying they're not all great hospice care in Amarillo, but I think throughout the United States, that's happening more and more.
Well, I think you see that in a lot of industries, that there's maybe a spiritual or a very compassion-driven approach. Even if you're starting it for profit, you're starting it from that framework.
Yes.
And then it becomes a numbers thing, or it becomes territorial, or, private equity gets involved, and they're just trying to turn a profit with stuff like that. And you start to lose that initial emphasis.
Yes. So, that's one thing that I'm interested in now in my career, is to really be able to focus again on what hospice should be, and to be able to, I don't know what my path is going to be, but to be able to help in that way. That's why I'm focusing a lot on the Crown of Texas Hospice Foundation.
Yeah, so tell me about that transition. Like, why, when people hear Crown of Texas now, why is it the foundation?
Well, the foundation, we started in 1992. So we started Crown of Texas Hospice in 1991. And as we were starting Crown of Texas Hospice, we didn't even have our license yet. My uncle was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and I was very involved in his care. And he knew what I was wanting to do is start a hospice. And he told me which nurse to hire, the nurse that he had at the hospital that he liked so much. And I got him hired, which is pretty cool. But he also told me, joked around with me and said, you can do this. He was an entrepreneur himself, and told me that, he was teasing, saying, despite what your dad says, because he liked to joke with my dad, you can do this. This is going to be good. And then he didn't tell me, but he had told the family that he wanted to make all donations to Crown of Texas Hospice.
Wow.
So quickly, I remember calling the attorney from his house. I needed to get a foundation started as well. So we applied for our 501c3 and began the Crown of Texas Hospice because of him.
Okay.
And with that, we were able to have, support Sky Camp. We were able to have patients that were non-funded in our hospice program. We didn't pay for their care through the foundation, but we paid for special needs. I remember having to pay for veterinary bill for one patient, because that was his only thing, was his dog was the most precious to him. We paid electric bills, gas bills, phone bills, rent, clothing, groceries. And we've been able to do that since 1992.
Okay. It's still an active foundation.
It's still an active foundation. Now we get requests from hospice programs for things like that.
Okay.
We also are very passionate, as you can probably tell, about hospice education. We've sent several hospice nurses to conferences for learning. We've supported the hospice programs here, do educational events, do bereavement events for the community.
Okay.
In fact, we're supporting one this month.
Okay.
So I think that's important. And I haven't been able to focus a lot on the foundation. So now I'm trying to really focus more on that. We now have a website, our very first website.
Oh, good.
I know. And somebody told me the other day, you should just take it national. It's like, wow, that's a thought. How cool would that be to have a really strong foundation to support special needs of hospice patients and families?
Okay. I know that Crown of Texas was not your only entrepreneurial venture, that you've also gotten involved in the pharmacy world with Valmed. So tell me how that happened and sort of what the reasoning was behind that introduction.
Yes. So we had an opportunity to sell Crown of Texas Hospice. It was, quite an emotional thing to do, but we did sell both Amarillo and Conroe. And
what year was that?
That was in 2004.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. With that, we had already started Valmed Home Health Solutions to serve Crown of Texas Hospice patients as far as medical equipment.
Okay. So it was something you started
before,
because you saw a need within the hospice for another little business venture.
Yes. And, for equipment for hospice patients, I think it's so important to be able to have pressure relieving mattresses, wheelchairs that are comfortable. I mean, things that to provide for that comfort. Medical equipment is huge for that. Oxygen, those kinds of things. And to be able to be on call 24/7 for those hospice patients. You never know when they're going to need things. and to be very mindful when they go into the home after the patient has passed away, and picking up that equipment. So we started Valmed Home Health solely for hospice patients and to be able to provide that dignity and comfort for patients and families in hospice. And then we expanded our home health to do, bracing and orthopedics and other things, not just hospice, as we grew and after we sold Crown of Texas Hospice. And then crazy me, I have no idea. I shouldn't probably have ever done that, but thought that we should also have a pharmacy because serve hospice patients.
Yeah.
But also, after we got out of hospice, as far as the everyday care, like you said at the beginning, to be able to stop and think, oh, maybe I could help with the health of a patient. How exciting would that be? And feeling like what I had learned in hospice to in a sense, take that whole interdisciplinary approach to care, to try to recognize people and where they are in their journey and their healthcare journey, and to help them through that. And not to be critical, but you don't really get that in chain pharmacy.
Right.
So an independent pharmacy is one that can connect those dots, that can get to know you, that pharmacists can get to know you. It was very unusual. We decided to start a pharmacy. I went to my first pharmacy conference and sat around with all the pharmacists, and they're like, where did you go to pharmacy school?
Yeah,
and I'm like, well, I'm not a pharmacist. And they're just like, what? You're a nurse and you own a pharmacy? And they're just like, they couldn't believe it.
I mean, most independent pharmacies are owned just by an independent pharmacist. Like
exactly.
That's not typically the business model.
In fact, I don't know of another one.
Okay.
So there might be one out there, but I'm not sure if there is. And, I think that as a nurse and being able to bring that experience, most pharmacists haven't been in a home care setting for a patient. So for me, I could teach them. Well, at home, the caregivers a lot of times are the people that are stressing the most about the medications, when they give it, how much they give, if, they run out. And so we purchased a machine that would package medications. It would have been a dream in hospice to have that. I used to do Excel spreadsheets and label bottles and try to help caregivers because it makes you so nervous when you're the one in charge of giving the medications and you're not a healthcare provider. So we started an adherence packaging program.
Okay.
We were the first in Texas to get that machine in an independent pharmacy. But I think that I think that my experience as a home hospice nurse helped in making a difference in people's lives in pharmacy. Feel very strongly about that. And then the other thing is that I could do immunizations. I could help in educating and help people understand, maybe from a caregiver point of view, from possibly a patient point of view, how we needed to be different in independent pharmacy. I got very involved in a group called CPSN Pharmacy, which is a community pharmacy program that helps pharmacies to really look at care planning in pharmacy for patients, making sure their immunizations are up to date, being that front person that really knows their patients well and helps with wellness. And payers are interested in that kind of program now, which is good. And during COVID, I don't know how many COVID vaccines I gave. My daughter came and helped. She's a nurse, and we were the mother-daughter shot team. But we went to every long-term care facility, businesses. We just took the shots on the road, which nobody else in town was doing that. And so we made a lot of difference, I think, in pharmacy, even as a nurse, just being able to bring that whole story together.
Did you ever think, I need to get my pharmacy degree? I need to go back to school?
No.
Okay.
It didn't interest me at all. I respect pharmacists, and I am their big cheerleader.
Yeah.
Because they need cheerleaders in the pharmacy world.
It's a hard world. I mean, it's a hard industry to be in.
It's really, really hard, and it just gets harder. And I really feel for those pharmacists that are really struggling to keep their pharmacies open. Over 2,000 pharmacies have sold or closed in the last year or two because of all the PBMs, the pharmacy benefit managers, and pushing towards chain pharmacies own the PBM, so they push patients to go to them. And the pay is horrible, the reimbursement's horrible, and I really am passionate about how we need independent pharmacies in our communities.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've been close to because my father-in-law was a pharmacist and experienced all those things, where you get to a point and you're like, I can't compete with Walmart, we can't compete with Target. And yet, when people have to move into that setting, then you're all of a sudden in this big corporate setting where you don't have the personal service that you might have gotten from an independent pharmacist.
Yes.
And so it's a world that continues to have challenges, continues to probably get worse. And I know that you recently had the opportunity to exit Valmed.
Yes.
And I want to talk about, you built Crown of Texas and then were able to sell that. You built up Valmed and you were able to sell that. What are you going to do next? Like what's next for you?
That's the big question. I've taken a little time. Well, finishing business is something that's taken a little time, just getting the payers to pay and sounds crazy, but I'm kind of fighting still for some claims out there, and working on the foundation. I'm not really sure what's next for me, but
you don't have a third business that
I don't
you're
have
going to
a
launch?
third business. I've promised myself I'm not going to start a business. I'm kind of ready to be an employee.
Okay.
I really am.
That's a lot of people who run their own businesses think about that. I can assure you.
Yes. So I'm not sure what it's going to be. I just know that God has a plan for me, and I'm very much at peace about that. Just not sure yet what that's going to be. I have a few thoughts, but I've had to also take a little time to breathe. Mm-hmm. We're trying to help my parents and my husband's parents, and spending time with our children and our grandchildren. But I'm not ready for the R word, is what I say. Okay. I'm just not ready for retirement.
You're not going to kick back on a beach or anything anytime soon.
No, it's just not my personality. I still feel like I can make a difference. I don't know where that is or what that is, but I know that just in talking to you today and just, working on my resume and working on the foundation, I know that hospice is still a very strong part of me. How I can make a difference, I don't know, but I want to continue to make a difference in hospice. I don't know what that might be, but I'm excited for my next chapter of life, just not the R word.
Okay. This episode of Amarillo is supported by Blue Handle Publishing, a local publishing company and press that serves as an alternative to the worlds of self-publishing and traditional publishing. Blue Handle has been producing some amazing titles by local and national authors, including the new novel Jones Point by Sean Hagerty, a 25-year special operations soldier. This military action thriller combines the author's real-life experiences with a fictional story that tackles kidnapping and child predators. In fact, the Blue Handle team told me that the military tactics described in this book are so realistic that the Department of Defense had to review and approve the manuscript before publication. So you can learn more about the award-winning Jones Point by Sean Hagerty at bluehandlepublishing.com. Okay, back with Sharla Valdez. Sharla, this is the part of the show I call 8 Straight. 8 Straight is sponsored every week by Panhandle Plains Historical Museum in Canyon. It's the largest history museum in Texas, and its collection includes a segment of rock with camel tracks that were discovered near Channing. Those tracks are estimated to be 2 to 5 million years old. We talk about not getting enough water. Well, at one point we were arid enough that we had camels here. So it's part of our history. You can learn more. You can see that at panhandleplains.org. Okay, when you think of Amarillo 10 years from now, what do you hope for?
I hope that we continue to really recruit professionals in Amarillo, that we have quality healthcare, quality education, and a safe environment. I think sometimes, and I love what you guys are what Brick and Elm is doing, trying to get professionals back into Amarillo. But I think it's important that people that have moved away move back and help in our professional world and our healthcare world. Sometimes I think it's very hard to recruit professionals to Amarillo, and we need to be able to do that. So continue with our quality of healthcare, continue with our quality education, and have that safe environment. I also hope that we have less poverty, less food insecurity in our community.
Yeah. Both of those are long-term challenges,
Yes.
that are not easy to fix immediately, but you just got to keep taking the steps toward it.
Yes.
Other than wind, what does this area have too much of?
I'm kind of worried that we have too much crime.
Yeah, the last couple of years have been attention-getting, I think.
Yes. I mean, I just feel like the crime and violence is something that, I don't know, it just feels like it's getting more and more of.
It does. I feel like, statistically, Amarillo is worse than some other cities of our size. I think, or at least I hope, that part of it's still sort of a pandemic hangover, that so many things just kind of blew up during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those safety nets disappeared. And I think what we're seeing is maybe some of the effects of that. And then as we move past it and as stuff stabilizes, maybe that will decline.
I hope so.
But I'm not an expert in any of that stuff. Yeah. So I don't understand it or claim to understand it. But it is something that, I want to see get better.
Yes, me too.
What does this area not have enough of?
I kind of started asking some of my nieces and my nephews, just because they were at the house last night watching the Mavs.
Let's avoid that topic, right?
Yeah, let's avoid that topic. But and they're right. I think that our recreation areas just need to be nicer and maybe more of. We have beautiful weather a lot of times, especially in the evenings. There's just not a place to go and, like my nephew said, throw a Frisbee, that feels clean and nice. And I wish and hope that we need more recreation, outdoor areas.
I agree with that. I'm glad that there is also some movement on that front. But again, it's a long-term way to address some problems. What's your favorite street in Amarillo?
Oh, I think I'm very partial to Georgia Street.
Okay. Why is that?
Because it's centrally located and near, there's so many resources on Georgia, and it's around my neighborhood. Okay. So I just think it's probably my favorite street.
Okay. What's your favorite local restaurant or food truck?
El Tejaban has got to be my favorite. I love their food and their service, and we go there a lot.
Yeah. No argument for me on that one. What's the most underrated aspect of living in Amarillo?
I think truly that it's family friendly. I think we have a strong values and pride in our community. For example, when I went to Amarillo High's graduation, I was so impressed with everyone that stood for the national anthem, that took off their hats. And you just have so much pride in our history, that feeling of community in Amarillo. And I think sometimes that's overlooked.
Okay. We didn't talk about this, but is there something as a business owner in Amarillo that makes it a friendly place to be an entrepreneur? The resources, the support, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I really think it's our strong history of entrepreneurs.
Okay.
I mean, just for example, when I went to Conroe, we talked about Cloth World and Hastings. But if you think about it, we have a lot of great entrepreneurs and people that have been successful, that have thought big in Amarillo. And I think that you can learn so much from them, from their bravery, from the way that they do business. I was part of a women's group. There was just entrepreneurs, and they're just amazing people that have made our community what it is.
Okay, what's your favorite building in Amarillo?
I've thought about this a lot, but I really think it's our churches, like First Baptist Church and Polk Street. If you think about it, what strong history, how the architecture, that if you built a church today, you probably couldn't build it like that.
No.
And it's just amazing to me that I think that they symbolize too what Amarillo is about.
Okay. And when was the last time you visited Paladuro Canyon?
I'm kind of embarrassed to say it's probably been at least a year or more.
Oh, okay. That's not bad.
And when we went and we hiked, and we said to ourselves, we're going to come back. We need
to do this more.
We need to do this more. It's just a great place to be.
Okay. Well, that concludes the 8 straight questions. I like to close by asking my guests to endorse something. So what's one thing you would like listeners to know about or to experience?
Well, of course, I really want people to know more about Crown of Texas Hospice Foundation. And also just in supporting, the efforts that we're making in supporting patients and families at end-of-life care. But I also think that I just want to say how grateful we should be to be able to have like what Texas Tech has built.
Okay.
A school of nursing, a school of pharmacy, a veterinary school, a school of medicine, all right here in Amarillo. Who can say that? So
hardly anybody can. That's one of the things that makes it so special.
Yes. So I'm very proud of our community. Again, the people that make the education strong here with WT, with Amarillo College and Texas Tech. I think that we should be very, very proud of that.
Okay. Sharla Valdez, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
And that concludes the episode. I want to say thanks to Sharla for the interview, and thanks to Lazy Boy Home Furnishings, Blue Handle Publishing, and Panhandle Plains Historical Museum for supporting this podcast. Thanks also to Angelina Marie for editing the show. And thank you for listening. I really do appreciate it. Hey Amarillo exists on a weekly basis because people listen to it. And that enough is the inspiration to keep doing these shows week to week. So I do appreciate it. I appreciate the local people who support it financially through patreon.com/HeyAmarillo. Hey Amarillo's executive producers include Patrick Burns, Jason Burr, Katie Linger, Corey Burns, Josh Wood, Wes Reeves, Cindy Graham, and Barbara and Jim Witten. This has been episode 360. My name is Jason Boyett, and I'll see you next week.